And I do think that's the challenge. It's very easy to believe, well, there has to be a right and wrong, right? Like, obviously there's a line where it's drawn of this is good leadership, this is poor leadership. But within that good leadership, there's just so many different styles. And as you said, preference, it's really easy to believe my preference is the way that someone's supposed to lead.
Hey guys, welcome to the Troy Gramling Podcast. This is my favorite time of the year because I know it's going to cool off eventually.
Yeah,
here in
hopefully soon.
Now, I don't know where you're watching or listening from today, and maybe the weather is beautiful, but still quite warm here in South Florida. And who you think's going to win the World Series?
The Dodgers.
Yes.
I don't even think it's close.
No, the Dodgers have the best player ever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
when you get 10 strikeouts and like 3 home runs or whatever he did. I mean, it's a video game.
And they're all over 400 feet.
Yeah. No, one of them was outside of the park.
It's an amazing time in which to be alive. I am glad you are here. Our goal always is just to partner so that you can reach your potential. Now, maybe that's not 10 strikeouts and 3 home runs, but we've all been given certain abilities and skills, and you need community, you need partnership, and actually to see those things happen. Today, I am joined by my middle son, Carson Lucas. Welcome.
I'm excited to be here.
Yes, it's good to have you.
Thank you.
And you're actually going to lead us. We're going to look at a TED Talk from days gone by.
Yeah, so you might notice it's an older TED Talk, but it's one of the more famous ones from a guy named Itay Talgam. I'm sure you could say that very clear.
Nice.
But he is a orchestra conductor.
Okay.
So he's got that mad scientist kind of look in his eye. And that's how he looks as well. But he uses the illustration of, orchestrating or conducting an orchestra to leadership. And so we've got some takeaways. So we're going to watch what he says, kind of take away some key elements from it.
All right. And then, hey, just a little side note. You happen to notice a little bit of green in my beard? It's because, if you go to potentialchurch.com, you could find out why I have green in my beard. It was an interesting weekend.
That it was.
All right, let's start.
And this is fantastic, and it's so tempting to think that it's all about me. All those great people here, virtuosi, they make noise, they need me to do that. Not really. If it were that, I would just, save you the talk and teach you the gesture. So you could go out to the world and do this in whatever company or whatever you want, and you have perfect harmony. It doesn't work. Let's look at the first video. I hope you'll think it's a good example of harmony, and then speak a little bit about how it comes about.
Beautiful. Yes, it was.
All right. So in that first clip, he talks about harmony, shows the clip. And one of the takeaways is that we have to, as a leader, define the now and help everyone align, right? An orchestra has many different parts. They're all doing their own thing, but have to align into this cohesive harmony, as he says, there in the beginning. And so when you think about leadership, when you think about, you lead a staff of many people, and what they're doing is the most important thing in the world to them. But you have to align all of that to accomplish one overall vision and goal. What do you think about, and how do you make that happen?
Well, if you notice when you look at it, they all had sheet music,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they can kind of see how it all fits together. And to me, that's the most important part and the easiest to forget.
Yeah.
Because in your mind, you know how it all fits together.
Right.
You know how important each section is, and they need to play it at the right time. But if you don't communicate that, right, you're still over there hitting your drums with your horn,
Yeah.
and you don't see the big picture. Because, again, as the leader, you've either been given the responsibility or you've been given the vision, but for some reason, you've been given the big picture. And a lot of people don't pursue it. You know what I mean? It's like, what do you want me to do? They don't want to get overwhelmed with everything. So you got to be real intentional about helping people, I think, see how important the role they play is, and how it all fits together. You know what I mean? How the other sections don't sound the same, or, it just doesn't work if you, aren't doing your part.
Right. I think also when you do it effectively, it kind of casts a vision itself, right? Like when it's done well, every person can see how much more impactful their thing is when it's brought within the group. I think when it's not done well, you start to wonder, well, the trumpet's holding me back. If I was by myself, I could do X, Y, and Z. But when it all comes together, when you can get people to trust you, hey, just trust me for a moment, and they're able to see how it comes together and see the impact it's able to have, together as a group, their gift, their talent, rather than on their own. I think it almost casts vision itself from that point on.
Well, we just see the outcome. You don't see the practice, right? See the practice that each instrument did on its own, the practice that of how they can come together.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there's a lot of, I think, individual work that kind of goes on behind the scenes that often doesn't get seen. So if you think about like leading a staff, there's like, or a team, it's like we all gotta fit together. But let me use like basketball. In basketball, I don't know how many folks pay attention to basketball, but they have a real popular in the NBA is like a pick and roll.
Right.
And that's two players that are doing the pick and roll. Now, that doesn't mean the others aren't important and they're not involved, but you might work over here with those two people just practicing on that pick and roll. But and that's done in, separately.
Right.
So they don't, and these other folks may be working on back cuts or something, you know what I mean? And it's not till it all comes together that you see how important it is for those other three people to be where they're supposed to, for the pick and roll to actually work.
Right.
And then they get open. And so I that's just an over communication, which again, so many of us are not very good at.
Yeah.
So I think that's because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like you said, and it's highly motivating when it works well.
Yeah.
And especially if you're all the folks that were a part of that, what we just listened to, are going to trust that conductor much more because they've, like you were saying, they've experienced that.
Right. Absolutely. I think we've got another clip here that outlines another key takeaway.
Responsible in front of him. Now, he doesn't really mean him. He means Mozart, which is like the third seat from the center. So he said, if I'm responsible for Mozart, this is going to be the only story to be told. It's Mozart as I, Riccardo Muti, understand it. And you know what happened to Muti? 3 years ago, he got a letter signed by all 700 employees of La Scala, musical employees, the musicians, saying, you're a great conductor. We don't want to work with you. Please resign. Why? Because you don't let us develop. You're using us as instruments, not as partners. And our joy of music, etc., etc. So he had to resign. Isn't it nice? No, he's a nice guy. He's a really nice guy. But can you do it with less control or with a different kind of control? Let's look at the next conductor, Richard Strauss. I'm afraid afraid you'll get the feeling that I really, picked up on him because he's old, And it's not true. When he was a young man, about 30, he wrote what he called the 10 Commandments for conductors. First one was, if you sweat by the end of the concert, it means that you must have done something wrong. That's the first one. The fourth one you like better. It says, never look at the trombones. It only encourages them. So the whole idea is really to let it happen by itself. Do not.
All right. So the takeaway from that clip is you want to create an environment of trust and autonomy. And what it says here, some conductors tightly controlled every nuance, as he talked about in the beginning of that clip. Others opened up a space for musicians' interpretation. Talgam suggests that when you trust your team, you invite creativity and ownership. So that idea that, okay, I've got some of the most talented musicians in the world and I can try and control all of this, or I can allow what makes them great to make us great. It requires you to give up control, and there's a fine line because you are the leader, right? There is a certain level. We've all had the leader that doesn't take control of anything, and it's just chaos, right? Like everyone's doing their own thing. So there's that fine line of, okay, I'm going to take control when I need to, but I'm also going to allow people to be great, and allow people to apply what makes them great. Because I do think that once you bring in control too much, people start to lose that individuality.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think it's the most challenging, or one of the most challenging aspects of leadership is the tension there. Okay, and especially from a Christian perspective, and I'm sure a secular as well, but it's like, okay, God put me in this position,
Right.
and I'm thinking it needs to be done this way. Now, is that because it needs to be done this way, or is that because I just want it done that way?
Right.
And distinguishing between those things is, I think, is difficult.
Yeah.
Because we all have personal preferences. I like things a certain way, you like things a certain way. And if you're not careful, there's a humility involved.
Yeah.
And that my way isn't necessarily the best way. I really do. And here's the thing with that is, I think a lot of times everybody says that, right? I just want the best the best music, or the best, church or business or whatever. But in order to get that, you have to humble yourself. In other words, you have to let other people win. You have to whereas if you're controlling it all, right, at the end of the day, you want to win and be the hero at the same time. It's like, there's a book called by Jim Collins called Good to Great, and he talks about level 5 leaders of great companies. And one of the things that he says is that they don't take all the credit. And again, everybody says this,
Right.
But there's a difference between what we say and what we actually live out. I remember going and visit in that book. My uncle was in that book, Lyle Everinghand. He was the CEO and chairman of the board of Kroger, and he was determined to be, in the book anyways, a level 5 leader. So I remember I went to talk with him because I didn't know he was quite so important. And was just asking questions, and it was so interesting to watch him give credit to his team, give credit to the board, just spread credit around. He really did live out what the book said a level 5 leader is. And so I think in order to do that, you have to be humble and secure to allow people, because they may outshine you in certain areas. They may have an idea that's better than your idea, and that's good. But it also takes humility to allow it to. And you have to be willing to take the risk. Because they could screw it all up. And then you're going to have to wrestle with it. And how do you not get bitter? A lot of times people who are control freaks sometimes aren't born that way. Sometimes, we are created that way. You get punched in the nose enough times and you're like, I'm not going to let that happen again.
Right.
And how am I not going to let that happen again? Take control of the situation.
Yeah.
So I think all of us kind of have to step back who are in leadership positions, even like as a parent, and say, I'm going to intentionally take the risk because it's been earned, not
Right.
just a stupid risk, but I'm going to, and allow, and give up and empower,
Yeah.
and give responsibility and empowerment to the people around me.
Well, and I think, you know, along those lines, that wrestle is so tough. And I do feel like, you know, especially as a parent, right? But in all leadership, there's moments also where you have to decide, because you're the leader. This is not always the case, but oftentimes you find that the leader has more experience. And in that, there's something that I don't understand because I haven't had the experience, right? So in the scenario here, you're the leader, you know what this isn't going to work because you've got the experience. And I don't. But what you have to wrestle with is if you jump in and decide we're not going to do this, which at times you have to, but then I'm never going to know it doesn't work. It's just that you've said it doesn't work. And while that has to be the case at times, if it's that case all the time, I believe employees just start to lose trust in the leader. And so there's that balance too, right? I know you talked about with parenting of like, even though you know they're making a mistake, how big of a mistake are you willing to let them make so that they can learn, so their decision making gets better, and so that ultimately in the long run, you don't have to take control as much because the decision making, the wisdom, the experience is there. But at the same time, you can't let everything fall apart, knowing it's going to fall apart just to allow people to learn. And I think that can be a tough balance as well.
Yeah, I think the risk is worth it though, because the other side is eventually your experience is a detriment. And what I mean by that is if you've got to control everything and you only have your experience,
Right.
Well, your experience is 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, right? There's new technology, there's new ways of thinking, there's new,
Right.
And so you have to you can't be a part. You know, you're going to have to get out of the way. They're either going to run over you or you're going to get fired or your company, it's going to fail or whatever. So I think it's worth the risk because that way you're able to stay on the cutting edge of what's effective.
Yeah.
You know, because you're finding out, that still doesn't work.
Right.
You know, but you're also able to empower those who are either younger or newer to the company or the church or whatever. And implement their ideas as well.
Yeah. And, you know, in a very practical sense where I've seen this a lot is I heard Simon Sinek talking about this, the next generation. I believe at the time he might have been talking about Gen Z, you know, now we're getting into Gen Alpha and soon the generation after that. But he was saying that they have a high need to have an impact, but a low understanding of how long it takes to have an impact. And what I've seen is the older generations really struggle to know how to connect with those people. And, you know, growing up in a time where maybe impact wasn't thought about as much, it was about doing what's necessary. This is just what's necessary. It's what I have to do. And so it's what I'm going to do. Well, you can see the conflict there between those two groups. And so it can be really hard, I think, for that older generation to allow the creativity and the thoughts and ideas of that younger generation because of that disconnect. And I think that's where it becomes so challenging because there's no doubt, right, that it's not good to not give time for impact to happen. But at the same time, that is where the generation is at. So how are we going to connect? How are we going to allow them to lead? Well, they've grown up in that environment. They've grown up with that mindset. And so just as age separates people, it can also create these barriers that make it even more challenging to create, you know, as it says, an environment of trust and autonomy, just with those differences.
Well, most people, you know, never get old. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like the hardest thing to accept is that everybody gets old.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you can't be successful or whatever. But I think our culture is so youth driven that everybody's afraid of getting old and they deny it. In the ministry, you see it all the time, right? A young pastor, let's say, you know, 25 to 35. And then they're like, I don't understand why the youth don't want to do our music. It's the same songs. And it's just like young people don't want to do with their parents, no matter, it could be the same song played on the same instruments. You know, young people are going to want to do their own thing.
Yeah.
And it's just hard. It's hard for people. It's so funny in ministry to watch people. It's hard for it to admit that the main reason the young people don't want to do what you're doing is just because you're older than they are.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
And I'm so cool. And you know what's funny about that? I think it's also because you think about old as what is old for you. You know what I mean? And so it's like, oh, well, that's old. This is not old. This is current. Things change now so fast. I think we've got another clip here that we're going to check out.
Yeah, that was very short, but you could see it's a completely different figure, right? He's awesome. He's so commanding. Yeah, so clear. Maybe a little bit over clear. Can we have a little demonstration? Would you be my orchestra for a second? Can you sing, please, the first note of Don Giovanni? You have to sing, oh, and I'll stop you. Okay? Ready? Well, come on, with me. If you do it without me, I feel even more redundant than I already feel. So, please, wait for the conductor. Now, look at me, and I stop you. Let's go. So we'll have a little chat later. But there's a vacancy for a... you could see that you could stop an orchestra with a finger. Now what does Riccardo Muti do? He does something like this. Oh, and then sort of... So not only the instruction is clear, but also the sanction. What will happen if you don't do what I tell you to do? So, does it work? Yes, it works. To a certain point. When Muti is asked, why do you conduct like this? He says, I'm responsible.
So in that, so now he's showed multiple videos. Actually, I think there's a lot we could take away from that clip, but there's he's shown multiple conductors at this point, orchestra conductors, and they're all different. And so he kind of takes a moment, talks about, you know, there's multiple ways to accomplish the same thing. The way it you know, he says it is understanding there's different leadership styles. We need to adapt to that. You know, I think it's interesting how easy it is when you're not the leader to want the leader to adapt to your style. This is the way I am best led. This is the way I want you to communicate to me. This is the way I want you to leverage my talents or gifts. But I really think it's important. No, we adapt to the conductor. We're going to be underneath the authority. Right? In order to be a great leader, I do believe you have to also be a great follower. Understanding what it takes to follow, understanding what you're asking of the people you lead. And so, you know, that idea of there's multiple ways to accomplish a vision, right? There's not just this one way. And therefore we've got to adapt. And as the leader, I think it's always what we did in the past, how I led in the past is not what's going to get me to this new future. And so I'm going to have to adapt. I'm going to have to change, right? We just talked about generations. There's a different way that this newer generation has to be talked to. It's just different. You know what I mean? And we can be frustrated by that. In a lot of ways, understanding, or I understand the frustration there. However, if we want to be effective, we have to adapt. Our leadership style has to change.
Yeah. It's, you could tell he didn't necessarily like that gentleman's state, the way he was leading.
Right.
But I think everybody is, you're right. We all, if I'm going to be a good follower, I have to adapt to whoever my leader is. And if I'm going to be a good leader, I want to adapt to my circumstances without losing who I am.
Right.
I got to be faithful to who I am, because it's who I am is the reason I'm in this position. Absolutely. I believe that with all my heart. So the more I discover who I am, the more successful I'm going to be. But I have to be who I am, adapting to the culture, the time, and all of that. But I also think you could tell he did not like the way that guy led. He liked the other guy. The old guy just was like this, and even one of his rules that he brought out, there were 10 of them, but he happened to say, I think it was number 4, is that if you're sweating by the end of the concert, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
Well, the guy he just showed was going to be sweating.
Oh yeah, no question.
So he has a preference. And I think we forget that about people. We sometimes think there's one way to do stuff. Like there's, in ministry, there's one way to preach.
Right.
In leadership, there's one way to lead. You can tell when folks are first getting started, or they haven't had a lot of failure in their life, because they start to believe there's one way and they happen to know the way. Where I think that overly dramatic is going to attract a certain kind of musician.
Yeah.
They like the passion, and others are going to be freaked out. You know what I mean? Like scared the whole time. It's like in athletics, or some coaches, you would think they didn't even know there was a ball game going on, because I just sat there, and then there are other coaches that are up with screaming and yelling, and and they both attract different kinds of players.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby Knight had people who played for him.
Right.
Some people hate it. If you don't know who Bobby Knight is, you go online and look. He threw a chair across the court. I mean, he did a lot of crazy things, but he had people who liked playing for him and people who didn't. People who now look back and think he changed their lives, and others who think he screwed it up.
And he had success doing so. Yeah. And I do think that's the challenge. It's very easy to believe, well, there has to be a right and wrong, right? Like obviously there's a line where it's drawn of this is good leadership, this is poor leadership. But within that good leadership, there's just so many different styles. And as you said, preference, it's really easy to believe my preference is the way that someone's supposed to lead. When in reality, that's just not the case for everyone. Everyone's got those different preferences. And the moment you get married, you realize that, right? You realize that your spouse's preferences are different than your preferences. Jess is very much more, I want you don't have to say it very nice. I just want to know what I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to do that thing. Or more so she prefers to decide what needs to be done and to do that. For me, I'm wired different. I don't really need much clarity in what I'm supposed to do. Just get me excited. That's really all I need. You know what I mean? And so it's understanding that there are, as you said, there's just multiple ways to go about leadership. And if we get too locked into this is the way it's supposed to happen, I think one, we eliminate an entire crowd that we could connect with, right? Because it's like, well, this is the only way to do it. And I also think we just stop growing. It's just like, this is all I know to do. This is all I can do. It stops and ends here. And
at
just
the same time, you can't be indecisive.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's why leadership is not easy.
No, it's not.
Because I don't want to follow somebody that's always wishy-washy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you got to be adaptable.
Yeah. The schizophrenic leader who's, changing their style with every book they read. They come in as a different person.
And pastors are bad about that. That's why some churches don't trust pastors.
Oh, yeah.
Go to one conference and they need to do this. They go to another conference and you do that.
Absolutely.
And that happens a lot, just I think in general today online.
Yeah.
People, they'll follow God, and then they'll be atheists, and then they'll be,
no question,
worried about the climate, and then they say it's all hoax. And
oh yeah,
it's just
what typically would have taken generations happens over the span of one college 4-year program. Yeah,
it's crazy.
But those were just some of the key takeaways from his discussion that I thought was really good. Again, it's one of the more popular TED Talks, and I think it's always important what we believe here, to learn from people who've done it, people who've been there. He's led successful orchestras in his time, and I think there's a lot we can learn there from how to lead a group of people to accomplish a common vision.
We back in the olden days when I was in school, we watched film strip. They don't do that anymore now. Look it up. But Bernstein, I can't remember his first name. I don't even remember why we were watching it, but I remember watching a clip of something, but a famous conductor, and he was one of those who sweated,
right?
He was all over the place. His hair was flopping and everything, but there's a lot, and because you don't think about, you think about leaders being business leaders or maybe coaches or whatever, but everything takes good leaders, and good leaders make the difference. Absolutely. Not everybody sees themselves as a leader, but in some sense, everybody has a space in which they need to lead. Yeah, and that might be a volunteer space. It might be Little League. It might be at home. It might be, but good leaders, make for good communities and good businesses.
The way you've said it before is leadership is ultimately all it is influence, and everyone has influence. It may be with your kids. It may be with your spouse. It may be with a company, but everyone has influence. Therefore, everyone at some capacity has to lead.
Not just the online influencers.
Correct.
Everybody has influence, and therefore a responsibility. So I want to encourage you to, are there more?
No, that's it.
I want to make sure I didn't want to cut you off. But I want to challenge all of us. One of the things I like to do from time to time is just look around and see where I see leadership.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll go to the mall, get me a Coke, sit in the, where all the chairs are and all the tables, and just watch people, watch parents as they lead, not in a judgmental way, whether they're good or bad. Sometimes I'll watch like city council meetings, which most people
Thrilling, riveting.
I just understand how people interact and what we do and what we say and the response it brings. I even like watching online. Sometimes it's, there's a tendency in all of us to want others to feel bad for us. And yet seldom online does that really happen.
Yep.
If you and I were to get on here and talk about how difficult it is to be a pastor and all of that, most people wouldn't feel bad for us.
They hate on us.
So that, as humans, we do that. And it's just interesting to watch that.
Yeah.
Watch that happen, to look at the comments, because there's a lot we can learn from the world that we live in. You don't always have to go to a conference to learn some great leadership.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you can have that kind of awareness of what's going on, you can kind of learn a lot in any situation you're in. I remember watching a YouTuber talk about their struggle and just thinking like, man, I'm not saying you're not struggling, but the people watching you wish they had your life.
Yeah.
No matter how big of a struggle you're truly in, they're not going to hear that.
Yeah.
They're going to hear you're complaining and you've got a great life.
Yeah. You go on vacation.
Right, exactly. And it's unfair, but it's what is.
Right. We tend not to have, it's like wealth. Everybody wants to be rich. Nobody likes rich people.
Exactly. Exactly.
And when you
That's so funny.
And you can't win that argument. Mm-hmm. And as a leader, that is really important to understand that.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to really feel sorry for you as a leader. Now, there may be people with compassion around you,
right,
who'll encourage you and, be there for you. But when they talk about leadership, it's only at the top. That's what they mean.
Yeah.
Because if you're not the leader, you and I might be able to sit around and talk about how unfair it is for us not to be the leader, or how the leaders got it easy. So that leader's not very good. So we might be able to commiserate. Right. If you're the leader, it's important to realize, because when you start to go down that road, you actually weaken yourself.
Yeah.
I don't mean you lie. It's okay to say, hey, I'm having a difficult time, pray for me. But if you try to make yourself into the victim, no matter how difficult it is, because I can't imagine, to have to put out a video every week on YouTube, and that's you're providing for your family that way.
Right.
And how many likes do you get? And and you got to come up with something creative every day. I can see where every year, it's 365 days a year. That's just to wear you out. And even if you're going to Disney every day, or you're going, to eat ice cream, whatever it is you're doing that looks fun from a distance, to have to come up with that every day. But nobody, like you said, nobody's going to feel sorry for that. No, nobody's going sorry for the president.
Yeah.
I'm
not who the president is.
Yeah, exactly. But can you imagine? Well, first of all, just what the president knows that we don't know.
Yeah.
The decisions they have to make, knowing that whatever decision they make, who, like you said, no matter whether they're Republicans or Democrat, independent, no matter, somebody's going to be upset.
Yeah.
People are going to say things that aren't true. It's just, but at the same time, he's living in the White House.
Exactly. Rare is the person who's sitting around, man, I just feel so bad for the president,
the king.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways, we are so glad you guys decided to check in today. I hope you've been encouraged and inspired and challenged. We'll put a link to that TED video so you can check out the whole thing if you'd like to. But there's a lot we can learn if we'll just open our eyes and look around. Hey, if you heard something that encouraged you or something you think somebody else might be encouraged by, all it takes is a click. Just a click, and you could make a difference. Because, there's lots of challenges living in the online world and social media and all of that. One of the great things is there's so much content that can really make a difference. Sometimes it's just a thought that changes a life, or a word of encouragement. So if you know somebody that needs to hear something that we said or something that you saw or heard, just click and it will make a huge difference. The other thing I want to encourage you to do is, if you haven't subscribed, just subscribe. Why not? It doesn't cost you anything. And it's a huge help to us. You know why? Because the algorithm is king in the YouTube and really on all the different platforms. It is king, and it makes a difference. And again, our goal is just to be an encouragement. We want to be one of those channels that reminds you can do it. You were created to do it. You are unique and have great opportunity out in front of you. And in community, we're much more likely to discover that. So don't forget, subscribe, share, and hey, leave a comment. Let us know what you think about leadership, especially about conductors, or maybe somewhere else you've seen leadership. Maybe as the manager at McDonald's or somewhere else. You never know. It might make a big difference in somebody's life. Don't forget, we're here every single Thursday with a brand new episode. We've got some really interesting people that we've been talking to, and can't wait to share those conversations with you. And we do a live stream every Wednesday, like at high noon. It's called The Break Room. It's just a lot of fun. So I hope you'll come and check it out. Hey, we'll see you next time right here on the Troy Gramling Podcast. God bless, and you have a great day.